Welcome to the preseason episode of Threshers on Deck. I'm Kirsten Karbach.
And I'm Josh Appel.
We're your hosts and the play-by-play broadcasters of the Clearwater Threshers. Our goal on this show here in 2016 is to bring you 360-degree coverage of the Clearwater Threshers. We'll have interviews with players and coaches. We'll learn about the mechanics of the game, from the proper wind-up to turning a double play.
And we'll look behind the scenes as well at some of the other aspects you might not be familiar with. Perhaps maybe I'll spend the day as the clubhouse manager or along with the grounds crew out on the field behind us. Maybe even spend the night behind the concession stand. Who knows? Lots to look forward to on Threshers on Deck.
Plenty of exciting coverage coming at you throughout the 2016 season. Now, for Josh or I as broadcasters to be able to say we've spent over 4 decades calling Major League Baseball games, it would be an honor and a dream come true. This spring training, I had a chance to sit down with a guy who did just that, the former longtime voice of the Philadelphia Phillies, Chris Wheeler. I'm pleased to be joined by a longtime voice of the Philadelphia Phillies and the voice of Philly spring training here in Clearwater, Chris Wheeler. And Wheels, just starting off, it was a really interesting story and circumstance surrounding how you made your broadcasting debut with the Phillies in the 70s. Could you share that with us today?
It's a long story, but I'll try and make it as quick as I can, Kirsten. I had been a broadcast journalism major at Penn State, and I loved the whole business, but I was working in the publicity department with Larry Shank. We were in Montreal in September of '76. We're playing a doubleheader with the Expos. If we win the first game, we go to the postseason for the first time since 1950, and we did. So between games, you have the thing that people see all the time with the champagne and the, all that nonsense that goes on. It was fun, but the problem was we had to play a second game. So we go upstairs, we get all cleaned up and everything, and I walk in the TV booth about the 4th or 5th inning, and Richie Ashburn and Harry Callis, a legendary group, are on the air, and Whitey does not want to do the game. He's bored. So he says, there's Chris Wheeler, this guy. He's always wanted to do this stuff. Why don't we let him do a few innings? And I'll be darned, he takes his headset off. I sit down, and now Harry Callis and I are doing the game. Our audio is being pumped next door into the Expos general manager, John McHale's booth. Bill Giles, our vice president, sitting there. And John McHale says, Bill, who's that broadcaster? And Bill says, John, I apologize. He's one of our PR guys. I have no idea what he's doing in there. And he says, John, he says, Bill, he's really good. He knows our players more than me. It's some of our people. Next year, the Phillies needed somebody to be on radio when the games were televised, just a small role. Bill decided, all right, I'm paying this guy to be on the road all the time anyway. What's the harm? Throw him in there. 37 years later, I was still doing it. So it was a remarkable day of what happened. And as I told you the other day when we were kidding around about this, if we lost the first game, it doesn't happen. And I don't know if I ever have the career that I had.
And similarly, it was kind of an unusual circumstance for how you ended up as the PA voice of Philly spring training, something that you continue to do here in Clearwater. How did that come about?
Well, I think a lot of people can identify with what happened to the guy that was supposed to be the PA announcer when they spent any time at all down here. It was my first spring training, 1972. Larry Shank, my boss, comes to me and he says, hey, so-and-so does the PA at the games here. He can't make it today. He got overserved last night. And that was a nice way of saying he was smoked. And he said to me, Wheels, did you ever do the PA anywhere? And I had never done it. And I said, sure, heck yeah, I'd done it. Threw me in there that day and I Wally pipped him. The guy never got back in, and I've been doing it ever since, except for a couple of years when we televised every game down here, as you know, and I was still a part of the broadcast, the television team. So other than that, I've done it every year except for 2 years, I think. And I enjoy it, it's fun.
Now, you spent about 4 decades as a broadcaster for the Phillies. You've seen the spectrum of Philadelphia Phillies baseball. In the 2000s, with guys coming through the system like Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, Jimmy Rollins, and Cole Hamels, guys who were drafted by the Phillies and developed through the Phillies farm system. How important is it to an organization to have guys like that coming up?
Probably more important now than ever. I lived through it once before when the guys in the 70s became the world champion Phillies in 1980. All those great players that people read about or were lucky enough to see play, many of them came through the system. Nowadays, it's even more important because of the economics of the game. We couldn't have kept all those guys all those years nowadays because you can't pay them all now. Back then, you could pay them. So now, you really have to develop a basis And you have to be able to have guys come up and be everyday players or fit into your rotation and those kind of things. If you don't, you're going to get in a lot of problems because teams don't have the free agents available that they used to because they sign them longer term contracts. It's the whole economic thing, Kirsten, has changed from when I first started. But the Phillies were very, very big on the farm system back in the 70s and 80s. It fell off a little bit for a variety of reasons, and now I think as people realize we're very much into player development again and the things you have to do. Plus, let's face it, we didn't play as well as we had before, so we started to get some draft picks back. For a number of years there, we kept signing sexy free agents and losing a #1 pick, or we'd have to give a compensation and all those kind of things. Now we're at the point where we're going to have our picks.
So maybe seeing a little bit of a return to that system development that we've seen in the past for the Phillies system. We've seen a lot of guys who've come through Clearwater, former Threshers, this spring training, getting some action in big league camp and moving their way up through the system. Do you think of guys like J.P. Crawford and Andrew Knapp, if you've had a little bit of a chance to see now, is there that potential to build around guys like them moving forward?
Sure, absolutely. In fact, one of the best things about this league down here is this is a good league. And when you see guys, let me put it this way, if you're a power hitter in this league, you're a serious power hitter because, as you know from doing the games, these are big league ballpark dimensions. And in the summer, you know, it's hot down here, and I'm sure the ball doesn't carry a lot of times. And when you have guys hitting home runs out in this league, you really look at them. As far as Knapp goes, I haven't seen enough of him. He really came on last year and had a heck of a time at Reading. But J.P. Crawford's, look, unless something unforeseen occurs, and I've seen guys, and you know, you think, maybe this guy's bona fide, big league starting player for a number of years. He's got all the tools. I saw enough of him this spring training and heard enough about his work ethic. His defense is, you know, it's still a work in progress, but it's all there. He can throw. He's growing into his body right now. What is he, 20 years old or 21 years old? He's going to be he's not quite a man yet. He's going to be soon. So this guy, everybody in the game thinks he's going to be a big-time player. Now, we had Dominic Brown a few years ago, and everybody said the same thing. But to me, when I watched Dom play, he just never had the same tools this kid has. So, yeah, this is a great spot right down here when fans come out and watch these clubs and see guys that can play on this level, because then they're going to start to move up into the AA and AAAs and those kind of things, and eventually the big leagues. I think the Florida State League is very, very important to the Phillies as a development area.
And finally, the Phillies may have had the worst record in the big leagues last year, but as a system, they finished with the third best overall organization farm system record of the 30 teams last year. And what are some of the things that you've seen that give Phillies fans some hope and some reason to pay attention to the team and the system moving forward?
Well, the number one thing is we gave up on the world champion 2008 team and the World Series team of 2009. We finally turned the page there and decided, okay. You know, and people got upset with the Phillies and the organization because they said, oh, you dopes, you kept them too long. We knew they were done. It's all right, we're happy you knew that and all that. But all we were trying to do was just try and win another World Series or get to one or have, you know, I've been lucky enough to be in both parades we've ever had, and there's nothing like being in a parade when you're a world champion. So I think we probably hung on a little bit too long, but as you know, that stuff started to flip around last year, and some of the things that have happened to improve our farm system happened because of trades, namely Cole Hamels, number one, and Ken Giles in the offseason, brought in some quality players. And the thing about them, Kirsten, is they're not all this level down here. They're AA and AAA, so they're closer. So they're the kind of guys you can look at and say, all right, they're not just total prospects. They're past that point, and they should be able to be developed to get to the major leagues. So I think the one thing that happened, other than the fact that they're getting some higher draft picks, like Nola and Crawford and those kind of people, is that we were able to trade some of our big name guys and make some things happen with that down the road we got so much volume back that you hope out of all that volume that you're going to get a couple players that are going to come up here and be big time players.
All right, and that's Chris Wheeler. Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure, Kirsten.
For continuing interviews and coverage throughout the Threshers season, visit threshersbaseball.com.
Man, what a great conversation with Wheels. It feels like you could hear stories from him for days.
It's really always a pleasure having the opportunity to speak with Chris Wheeler during spring training. And as you heard in that conversation, we talked about some of the guys who have come up through the Philadelphia Phillies farm system and made an impact at the big league level. And Josh, we saw a lot of talent come through Clearwater in 2015.
We did. Guys like Reese Hoskins, Dylan Cousins, Edubrai Ramos, guys like that who were just huge parts. Mark Leiter Jr., I don't want to leave a guy like him off. He was such a huge part of the rotation a year ago, helping the Threshers win not only the first half, and really, we're the best team in the entire Florida State League in the second half, winning 42 games.
And with that, let's get into our predictions for the 2016 season. Josh, we'll start with your pick for a former Thresher who's primed to have a breakout year in 2016.
I'm going to go with Andrew Knapp, a Phillies catching prospect. He spent the first half with Clearwater last year, then went up to Reading. His average really took a jump up when he went up to Double-A, hit 11 home runs, 2 here in Clearwater. But I expect him to keep that same pace in 2016.
Andrew Knapp will certainly have a lot of eyes on him as he climbs the ranks in the Philadelphia Phillies system. My pick for a breakout player, a former Thresher, is Dylan Cousins. Now, we saw Cousins spend some time on the disabled list toward the middle of last season here in Clearwater, but when he came back, he really caught fire. He was a guy that, in talking with the coaching staff, really became a better hitter throughout last season. His power numbers took off in the second half of the season, and once he was promoted to Reading, 3 home runs in 11 games up in Double-A. They've got the smaller ballparks up there in the Eastern League as well, so I'm expecting big power numbers from Dylan Cousins this year in a breakout season for the Phillies outfielder. Now, your prediction for a Thresher this season who's going to have a breakout year, somebody that we're expecting to see, if not an opening day, at some point here at Bright House Field.
This is a really tough one because there are a lot of players that are coming back from last year that we expect to make big improvements coming into this year. But I think I'm going to go with Alexis Rivero, who really impressed us a year ago. A live fastball in the high 90s, a great breaking ball to complement it. His opponent batting average was under 200. He had a 5-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, 30 Ks in 27 innings of work. Should be a big part of the back end of the Threshers bullpen.
And my pick for a Thresher to have a big year this year is Jairo Munoz. He's a guy with a great arm and a really great story. He spent a few years in the Kansas City Royals farm system before being released in 2014. That offseason, he found himself working in a bodega. He was pitching in a men's league in the Philadelphia area. And then the Phillies signed him in January of 2015. Now, he spent some time in Lakewood last year, mostly in relief, made a couple starts at the end of the season, posted an ERA right around 2. I think he's going to be an exciting arm to watch as he climbs the ranks in the Phillies system, and we're likely to see him here in Clearwater in 2016. Now, one final prediction for you, Josh. How many wins are the Threshers going to have this year?
Clearwater had 79 a year ago, and it was such a great season. It'll be tough to duplicate what Clearwater did in 2015. But I think they'll fall, even though a little bit short of that, 75 wins is where I have them at. Still a great mark and should have them in contention for the playoffs.
And I'm looking for them to be about at that 75 win range as well. We saw them win 79 last year. They won 42 in the second half. Really a strong team in the second half last year. So the Threshers won both halves. I don't know if they duplicate that, but I do think they're going to be competitive throughout the season. I think we're going to see a really good team again here in Clearwater this year, and one that will contend for a Florida State League North title once again after we saw them make the playoffs last year for the first time since 2007. Looking ahead here on Threshers on Deck, we're very excited to be bringing you this bi-weekly show. We'll be starting for you the first official episode on Friday, April 15th, so look for that as our Threshers on Deck series kicks off. For now, we'll leave you with a look back at some of the things we got into on ThreshersBaseball.com last year and plenty of exciting coverage to bring you in 2016.